touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.
Welcome into the latest episode of Mac and Mose. Andy McNamara, joined by the editor-in-chief of GoDucks.com, Rob Mosley. We are here to wrap up Oregon's big win over Georgia State. Final score of 61-28. The Ducks really were able to get on the board early and often in this one, not necessarily by scoring touchdowns, a lot of field goals, 4 of them in that first half, but a little, with a new quarterback, it's somewhat expected maybe that there was a bit of a learning curve for Jeff Locke, even though he's practiced with these guys for years now. Game situation, totally different scenario.
Yeah, new group on the offensive line too. Doug Brenner playing in place of Cameron Hunt, Jeff Locke behind center in place of Vernon Adams. So, in hindsight, maybe not totally shocking, but I think those guys would tell you too. They needed to be putting up 7 instead of 3 in those situations. Great to see Aiden Schneider making field goals, silver lining. And as Mark Helfrich said, he'd rather have touchdowns too, but if you're going to be kicking field goals, you want to make them. Overall, though, just great for Jeff Locke to get that under his belt. You got to imagine that's not going to be his last start for the Oregon football team, whether it's later this season or next season after Vernon Adams graduates. He'll be back around. So, now you get a ton of film, you got a ton of game experience, and a lot to learn from.
We mentioned it coming into the game that it would likely be a game for Oregon to get a lot of different players out there, get some experience. Royce Freeman played the entire first half. He only ended up with 10 carries, still was able to manage to break 100 yards. It seemed like every time he touched the ball, he got between 8 and 20 yards. Had a touchdown, but Taj Griffin a little bit more of a role in this one. I think fans got a glimpse of maybe the talent that is there. Tony Brooks-James got a couple touches as well. We didn't see Kenai Benoit in this one, but receivers, Jaylen Brown, another guy that made his first catch as a collegiate in this one, had a couple more, started to look comfortable out there. So one thing that Locke had to deal with, not only just his first start, but there was a lot of, you mentioned Doug Brenner on the line, but a lot of different personnel groups, a lot of different personnel in there at various times throughout the game.
And that's good news. I mean, those are valuable reps for all those guys going forward. When you schedule games like this, against an opponent like Georgia State, it's not a Pac-12 caliber opponent. You want to get in, you want to put on a show for your fans, but you also want to get in good experience for your younger players who might not get a lot of reps the rest of the season, but say going into next year, might have to play big parts. So it was good to be able to take advantage of that. There were times in the third quarter, certainly, where this game was closer than you'd like it to have been. You look at the final stat sheet, and there's, I think 11 guys caught a pass, 20-something guys made at least one tackle. So a lot of guys got to get in and get their feet wet a little bit.
You mentioned the third quarter. Oregon ends up surrendering 28 points in this one defensively. However, the defense did account for 2 touchdowns themselves, so that's a net 14. If you want to spin it that way, I think that you'll take that pretty much week in and week out if your defense can provide you with a couple touchdowns. First pick 6 for the Ducks since the Alamo Bowl back in 2013 to end that season. They had 2 in that game, so that was good to see. Defensively, some of the guys talked about maybe being a little bit too comfortable up 33-7 at the half.
Yeah.
Georgia State had a couple of big plays. You did a practice report today where you focused a lot on the secondary. A couple of mistakes in there, but also some good things out of the young guys in the secondary in this one as well.
Yeah, I think John Neal really likes the development of Glenn Iannaccio at this point, thinks he's a guy that can help this team going forward, and I would expect to see him get more reps as this season progresses. They relied heavily on the starters, and a nickel guy the first couple of games, but used more guys. Juwan Williams played a lot against Georgia State. I think the biggest takeaway for me is to see 11 tackles for loss that included 4 sacks when they only had 1 in the first 2 games, 4 turnovers forced to the 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles after, I think, 3 turnovers combined in the first 2 games. This is, I think coaches, players, and certainly fans would love it if this was a defense that led the nation in 3 and outs every year. That doesn't happen. This defense tends to give up some yards and some first downs, but what's always made a difference for the Oregon defense was making turnovers and negative plays for the offense, tackles for loss, sacks, things like that, being disruptive, as they like to say. And so this was as disruptive as the defense has been all year. Now, Granted, again, it's not a Pac-12 opponent, and so you got to do it against Utah and Colorado and such going forward the next couple weeks. But it was good to see those guys start to make those plays and start to look like an Oregon defense has looked in recent history.
If you go back to the second half against Michigan State and then into this one, DeForest Buckner has really started to make his presence known, even though he didn't play the full game against Georgia State. Was able to get a 1.5 sacks. He was part of that tackle for loss parade.
Yeah.
Tyson Coleman with a great sack and a strip. That was then picked up by Joe Walker and taken in for a touchdown. So this defense, 35 touchdowns now since 2010, either defense or special teams. Oregon leads the country. So it is a little bit of a risk reward, and sometimes that's kind of hard for fans to swallow. They want to see a pass rush on every single down and
blitz more.
You know, if it was only that easy.
Ifs and buts aren't worth a whole lot, obviously, but I can't imagine there were more teams the first 2 weeks of the season that had as many near sacks as the Ducks did. I mean, Tyson Coleman was credited with 2 quarterback hurries in the opener, and both of them looked like certain sacks, and then the Eastern quarterback just got rid of it right in the nick of time, and there were a few more like that against Michigan State. Well, you know, teams are getting the ball out quick. I mean, offenses in general across the country are getting the ball out quick to avoid pass rush and try to pick on a secondary throw underneath, move the ball that way, and that makes it hard to get to the quarterback. But the Ducks are starting to finish a few more plays because Georgia State was trying to get it out quick too. And then you mentioned Defo. After two games in which cornerbacks were Oregon's leading tacklers, for DeForest Buckner to lead the team with 7, get those negative plays, you know he's attracting a ton of attention from opposing blockers, double teams, things like that. And so to be that productive in spite of that is really, really impressive and tells you the level of play he's playing at as the Ducks go into the Pac-12 portion of the schedule.
And that's big, especially when you come up against a Utah team that features Devontae Booker, one of the best running backs, all-purpose backs really in the Pac-12, whether he's running the ball or catching the ball. He had over 100 yards receiving against Oregon last year, so he's going to be a handful. Utah in a similar boat like the Ducks in terms of who they're going to start at quarterback. Travis Wilson, who started the season as the top guy, got injured a couple weeks ago. He could be back, maybe not. We still don't know the status 100% for either Vernon Adams or Jeff Locke. So a few questions to be answered before the Ducks kick it off against Utah. But we will preview that matchup a little bit later in the week. It is the number 13 Oregon Ducks against the number 18 Utah Utes. That is going to be a 5:45 kickoff. The broadcast will start at 5:30 p.m. on Fox. We also have a game time to report on for the Colorado game, which is a road game for Oregon. That's going to kick off at 7 o'clock Pacific time, 8 o'clock Mountain Time in Boulder, and that will be on ESPN, a national broadcast. So a little bit of a nice surprise there for Oregon to get that exposure. I know it's a late game for some folks, but Colorado doesn't make it on ESPN all that often, so it's certainly a big deal for them. We'll be back later in the week. If you have specific questions you'd like us to address here on Mac and Mose, you can hit us up on Twitter. I am at McNamara UO. He is at Duck Football. Until next time, we'll see you.
Gets the corner into the end zone for the touchdown. It's through 50. He's got the speed. Touchdown.